All right, and we're live, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am super excited for this interview. I have Dr. Gabrielle Lyon here with me, who we have been trying to schedule this since the beginning of this whole thing going on. I think it was like the first day that we were all kind of sent home, and we were going to talk on Zoom, and then I had a pipe burst in my basement, and
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think actually now, I think my daughter actually pulled a pipe off the wall. I don't think it actually exploded. Yeah, so, but here we are. So, yeah, thank you. For those of you who don't know, those of my people who are watching who don't know you, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself. I know that's a loaded question, but
no problem. So my name is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. I practice something called muscle-centric medicine. And it's really the concept that muscle is the organ of longevity. Yes, that's right. Muscle is not just for looking good in a bikini, but it is an endocrine organ. And it is the key to everything as it relates to health, our trajectory of aging. And really, my practice is all about augmenting that tissue. So without going into some long-winded spiel about it, right now, all we do is focus on adiposity, being over fat, being overweight. That's the wrong message. It's not about being over fat. It really is about being under muscled. You know, and I did like 17 years of schooling and 7 years in nutritional sciences and a fellowship at WashU. And here I am. Here we are.
It's amazing. You know, and I've heard you talk so much about kind of working with the elderly population. That is the big thing that I've heard you say so many times, is that they're so under muscled and that they have this injury, and then that's the end of it for them. They break a hip and then they're gone. Talk a little bit about that for me.
So it's really interesting. What we're seeing in society is truly a continuation of metabolic dysfunction. What does that mean? That means that our ability to manage our calories, right, begins midlife, if not earlier.
Yeah.
However, subsequently, what happens is a destruction of muscle tissue, commonly thought of as sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle function, muscle mass, muscle strength. Now, parts of this are inevitable. However, it really plays a role in metabolic regulation. So muscle, as the organ of longevity, is responsible for your metabolism as it relates to the foods that you consume. I'm sure a lot of people who follow you are not high carb people. You guys are probably on the lower carbohydrate end, if carbs at all. So, you know, you asked me about aging, sarcopenia, and elderly. Aging really starts in your 30s. So I want to be very clear on that.
Okay.
Yeah. So aging, Alzheimer's starts in your 30s.
Wow. Okay.
Sarcopenia, the destruction of muscle tissue, truly begins in your 30s. Now, this is very novel. These are novel concepts.
Yeah,
not for everybody.
That's how I've heard anyone say that.
Right. So, you know, as we think about aging, now I did a fellowship in geriatrics, in obesity medicine and geriatrics. That was part of, you know, the work that I did at WashU. By the time you're considered geriatrics, with the true definition of geriatrics is 65 and above. But what it is it's really the end of life care. It's really significant. It's pretty sad. And what's so interesting is that begins in your 30s. And the time to manage muscle tissue, not about looking good in a bikini. It's not about what that physicalness. It truly is this endocrine organ. Wow. So by the time that you've aged with sarcopenia, which this natural destruction of muscle tissue, which happens, right? You even see that in aging animals, right? So by the time that this happens, you really want the biggest reserve you can of skeletal muscle, because it allows you to have an amino acid reserve. And really, as it relates to now, your survivability is directly related to your muscle mass.
Wow. That's amazing. And so what is it with the 30s? I know that's like, why do you say the 30s is kind of when all of that really starts for us? Is there some significant loss that begins happening at that age?
It's not particularly the loss in skeletal muscle. And if you asked anyone 20 years ago, they would probably move that number up to 40 or 50. But because our population is dealing with really a threefold increase. Number one, we are domesticated. We are domesticated as a planet. We are domesticated as humans. We don't move and we don't train the way that we're supposed to. The way that we were designed to do hard physical work, whether it's hunt or whatever, we're domesticated. So there's that aspect of not utilizing muscle tissue. You combine that with really bad information and agenda-based medicine rather than evidence-based medicine of overconsumption of carbohydrates, and the narrative that protein is bad for you, low protein diet is like this perfect storm. And then you throw in, now you've got overweight, you have a hormonal disruptions, right? Your hormonal milieu, the natural testosterone, the IGF, IGF-1 that you would, get as your training increase through resistance training, you're not really getting. And, like I take care of a ton of athletes, and even the women that are training hard, Alina, you're probably listening, they get hypothalamic dysfunction. So then they have this kind of stress response from the top down that really shuts off a lot of their natural capacity, and the ability to change body composition alters, right? You just don't have the wherewithal.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. I mean, and we have such a huge epidemic right now, even more so because all of us have been kind of cooped up in the house for, the last 2.5 months. And I see a lot of people gaining weight, including myself. I've put on a little extra weight, and being less active and not going outside. And it's like this huge crisis that's exploding. It's that no one's really talking about. It's funny. It's like a meme people make of like, here's me after quarantine, and it's like, okay, it makes me feel a little bit better, but we don't really understand the seriousness of losing muscle, adding extra fat, like what that's actually doing to the body's immune system.
And you bring up a really good point that I think has not actually been discussed. And it's that there is a trajectory of aging that happens. And this is based on the research in bed rest. So, and as it relates to, in particular, quarantine, so you're not moving as much, maybe you're gaining some weight, but what about the aging population? So what about our elderly population? Their ability to put muscle back on is incredibly diminished. So this is actually devastating for our aging population. And when I say aging, I'm talking about even 50s. I mean, the ability to recover muscle tissue, which is our underlying metabolic currency, is drastically diminished. And this is data out of Doug Patton-Jones's labs, if anyone's interested, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and what would you say to somebody out there who is like, all right, I got to protect myself. I've got to help. What would they do now to start, even if the gym wasn't open, what type of things nutritionally, obviously we want to talk about that, but also physically, what could they do?
Well, number one, really to save tissue and to even build tissue is having adequate protein, and then training. When you think about training, you think about multiple modalities. There's resistance training, in particular hypertrophy, which is, laying down more tissue, growing tissue. And that in and of itself, is really related to volume, can be compensated if people don't have weights to use higher volume, lower weights. If body weight is all you have, then you're going to use that, whether you're doing squats or push-ups or, I don't know, whatever other body weight stuff that you can do. I mean, don't allow quarantine to be an environment where you're stopping to move. You can do 1 million push-ups and 1 million sit-ups and 1 million squats. So that's one aspect. So really getting that volume, if you don't have the heavy weights, if you don't have a weight set at home, utilizing more volume can help stimulate that tissue. And then of course there's
Uh-oh. Looks like we lost her, guys. Hang on. Hopefully she'll be able to pop back in. There she is.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just can't see you.
I don't know why. Maybe if I hit the video.
Yeah. Oh, we see it.
I'm in the show.
Yep, you're in.
That's so weird. I don't know.
That's so strange.
My browser lost connection. I don't know what's going on.
Very strange. There you are.
Oh,
But there, okay, there you are.
cool. All right. So there's the resistance exercise, which is really valuable, and then the high intensity interval training. And that truthfully is hard to do in a house. You know, it's not doing a bunch of, you know, it's very hard to push yourself without equipment as it relates to high intensity interval training, because you're probably not going to be sprinting down the street. I mean, but that would be great.
Right.
Even jump rope. So that's something that would be easy to to implement is doing interval training. What it's 20 seconds on or 10 seconds off. There's a whole group of training programs that you can do based on high intensity interval training. And then of course there's sprint interval training. I do think incorporating some kind of intervals 2 to 3 times a week is really great. So I utilize that for my tissue, for muscle, but I utilize that with kettlebells. So it has strength and intensity.
Got it. Now you did some training with Charles Poliquin, is that correct?
Yeah, he's a longtime mentor and friend of mine.
That's
I actually
awesome.
taught for him.
That's so cool. Everyone's probably like, who is that? There's a trainer here in Atlanta who studied under him and was like in daily contact with him, that I trained under for a good year or so, like right when he passed away. And it was devastating to him because they were really close. But when I had training with Rob, it was some of the most intelligent training I've ever had in my life. Like he would have me do something and we would leave it alone. He did the whole neurotransmitter typing. So he would take all of the tests and program my training completely around my neurotransmitters. And so he would have me do something and we'd go back to it 3 weeks later and I would have like a 25% increase in strength. I mean, it was so fascinating. So I really got a good appreciation for just intelligent programming at that time. I thought it was really cool. Yeah, some people are saying they know who it is. What would you say to somebody who says that they're eating adequate protein and that they're strength training, but they're still not able to build muscle?
That would make me think, well, initially that they're probably not training hard enough, truthfully, or they don't have a well-designed program. And then, you know, you got to see numbers. So how much protein are you really eating? Are you already overweight? Do you have inflammation? I mean, individuals with inflammation do have a harder time building muscle. This is just something that I see in clinical practice as well. And I think his name was Bird, just also recently published a study. There's this concept called anabolic resistance. And anabolic resistance is something that we think about in the elderly. And it's that inability to really stimulate the machinery as it relates to putting down muscle. And what happens is an individual who is older or has anabolic resistance requires more protein at one time to stimulate the normal machinery to begin the process of muscle protein synthesis. That being said, anabolic resistance can be seen in obesity.
Okay. So basically, the person will need to eat more protein to synthesize muscle being produced, basically.
Yeah, it was really, did you hear that? It was really broken up. I only heard part of that.
So basically, you think someone would need to eat more protein if they were having trouble building muscle?
I think that it's twofold. I think you have to get inflammation down. So you have to be able to limit inflammation, because what happens is, you know, muscle is an endocrine organ, and there's really a crosstalk between adipose tissue, which is also the organ of inflammation, and muscle tissue, which is the organ of longevity. So adipose tissue does secrete inflammatory proteins that do, I believe, make it more difficult to put on muscle. So you have to balance the being obese or having inflamed tissue with training adequately and increasing your protein. You know, there's all kinds of things that happen. There's hormonal changes that happen. People really simplify it, saying it's calories in, calories out. Calories matter. They do. But is it I would be foolish to say that that's the only thing. It's not.
Right.
Right. There's components of science that we don't know, like the microbiome with, increasing efficiency of calorie absorption. I just attended Obesity Week last week, and virtually, of course.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because it did talk about the multiple pathologies as it relates to adiposity and being overweight. So your question was, what would you tell someone who couldn't build muscle but was eating protein and training? I would say, number one, show me the proof, right? Are you really training hard enough? And are you really eating enough protein? And then the second aspect of that will be, hey, what are the other influences that are at work here? Because that's all important.
Right. So stress, sleep, those types of things also.
Sleep is important. Sleep is important for glycemic control. It's important for being able to manage blood sugar. It's also important for Alzheimer's and brain and cognitive function, because the brain is an organ as well. So that's important. And then, of course, the body repairs when it's sleeping.
Got it.
So listen, sleep is not easy for people, right? And I take care of a ton of hard chargers, and I would consider myself pretty driven. And that's the part that's easy to skip on is sleep, I mean, I have a new baby. My husband is full-time medical school. It's a lot. So you think, okay, well, what is the one thing that I can skimp on?
Yeah. What is your kind of routine for getting better sleep, even with all the stuff that you have going on?
Well, I don't really have a routine of doing that, but I did make a commitment. So my doctor, Dr. Ralph Esposito, he would be great for you to have on.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to actually check on my sleep hygiene. I used to sleep with wax earplugs. So that's really helpful because it allows for sensory deprivation and then an eye mask. But, the baby's been teething and had a fever the last couple of days. So I haven't really been getting a ton of sleep. But as it relates to sleep hygiene, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time is really what I would recommend. And do I typically do that? I have in the past.
Yeah.
But this last couple of days has been a little off.
It's tough with a baby. I mean, it's tough with kids. Like, we do our best, and then we kind of have to do, what they're doing also. So we have a limited choice kind of in the matter, for sure.
Right.
So I guess let me ask a couple of these questions that I have from Instagram, and then we can jump into some of these as well. But I guess a lot of my people on Instagram really are curious about how much protein they need to be eating, and I think that's bio-individual, honestly. But do you think there? Yes. Oh. You there?
Yeah, there's a lot of feedback.
So interfere. I don't know what's going on with the interference. Hold on one second. Let me see. Okay. It might be my phone interfering. Are you hearing all that clicking?
I am.
Yeah, that's so strange. Okay. All right.
Do we need to log off and try it again?
It seems like it happens every time I talk. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can. Would you be all right with that?
Yeah, whatever you need. I wanted to make it worthwhile for people so that they can learn and really.
Yeah. Well, that's so annoying.
It's okay.
Yeah, let's see if we can log off and then try it again. If that's all right. Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to try to come back on because I don't know why we're getting all this clicking. And we'll be right back.
Okay.
All right.